Hi and welcome. If this is your first time here, my name is Tiffany and I'm the International Witch. Today I'm going to be doing my May bullet journal layout, and as always I'm going to be using my Reverie journal by Mellow Days. So it looks like I'm going to have a year and a half in this book. I know most people would buy another book each year, but I just don't like to be wasteful. And if I can get a year and a half out of this journal, then at the end of 3 years, I will have only purchased 2 journals instead of 3. And hey, that's like $40 I've saved. I'll take it. I'm going to be using my STA Pigment Liners, specifically in sizes 0.2 and 0.6. They are water resistant, not waterproof, but I plan on using my Primrosia 100 Dual Tip markers again. And I am specifically using the shades 33, 35, 56, and 98. For the cover page of May, I was inspired by this vintage Art Nouveau ad for the emerald. It was by a jewelry company, and the frame really caught my eye, and I loved the irises. But for the iris, I was specifically inspired by this purple iris. It is specifically called the Discovery Purple Iris, and I really loved the vibrant color and that pop of yellow. I hope that you'll excuse that I am using markers this month and not my usual watercolors. I do prefer watercolors over markers. However, I had a death in the family and had to go back for a funeral to the US, and I just got back this week. So it is currently April 25th, it is Friday, and I am editing this video just now and really crossing my fingers that I can get it out tonight as well. I'm sorry if it's a little late, but that is what I am gunning for. As a matter of fact, the trip to the States was so long and exhausting. It was only supposed to be 16 hours, but unfortunately, from the time we got up and left our house to the time that we arrived home in the US, it was a full 24 hours from start to finish. The very first flight we had, we connected in France at the Charles de Gaulle. And as we're sitting on the tarmac, the pilot comes over the intercom and lets us know that the loader is stuck on the airplane. And we sit there for an entire hour on the tarmac. And then the pilot gets back and says, good news, keep in mind this is after an hour. Good news, the technician has just arrived to fix the problem. And another 15 minutes goes by and she gets back on the intercom and says, well, now we're having some problems with our manual steering. Please be patient. And at this point, I'm thinking, I kind of don't want to cross the Atlantic on this plane anymore. Luckily, we get wheels up. And when we arrive in Atlanta, I'm worried because now, our plane was an hour and 30 minutes late, only to find out that our flight from Atlanta to Alabama is 3 hours behind. So we had to sit at the airport for another 2 hours extra, which, at least we didn't miss the flight, but it's one of those things when you finally get done with an extremely long flight where you're like, I just want this to be over. You'll notice that I'm taking the time to go through and add shading on everything. When it comes to markers, it is extremely important that you shade. I think that is the most important part of using markers. And that's because it's so flat. Like with watercolor, you get these gradations and the way the colors settle differently. But with markers, it is extremely flat and you need that shading to kind of give it more life. The thing I don't like about markers is how fast they'll dry out. Like the green that I'm using here, it's kind of like my olive green with watercolors. I use the heck out of this exact shade of green. And unfortunately, by the end of my May setup, that green is almost out. Like I have to start using another green to do outlines and stuff. At least with my watercolors, like one tube will last for 3 years. The quote for this month is from the book The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgins Burnett, and it's, "If you look the right way, you can see the whole world is a garden." And I thought it was very important, especially for my state of mind this month, to remind myself that there is positivity and beauty if I choose to see it. And here's a close-up of the cover page. You'll notice I started on Monday instead of my usual Sunday, and that's because I made a boo-boo, but it works just as well. And now on to my scheduled page. I've been asked at least 2 times why I prefer to do a long format schedule page instead of doing a giant monthly calendar layout. And honestly, it just comes down to the way that my brain works. I have a really bad habit of seeing something on the calendar for the next week and thinking it's so far away time-wise that I don't have to deal with it now, but that's not always the case. For me, the calendar kind of tricks our perception. For instance, if today is the 9th and I have a project due on the 13th, I'll think to myself, well, that's next week. I have plenty of time to do it, but I don't realize that I only have 3 days technically to get it done, because my mind view those as such separate things. So when I use the schedule layout, the one line like I do, I see all 30 days next to each other and not necessarily grouped separately. I won't be adding in the dates on this right now. I'll wait until I scan it in because it's really hard for me to get the tiny little numbers to come out properly whenever I scan it in. So I'll add that digitally for you guys to download afterwards so that it's nice and crisp for you. And since I've went ahead and discussed the downloads, if this is your first time here, then you may not know, but I offer all of my bullet journal layouts as well as grimoire pages for free download on my website. All you have to do is navigate to the home page and sign up for my newsletter. You'll receive a code in your email, and you'll enter that code in the grimoire section of my website. Everything is completely free. You can download it as many times as you want. All I ask is that you please don't pin anything in my password protected section into Pinterest. On my habit tracker for this month, you'll notice that I am taking a complete 180 from what it was last month. Last month I had room for I think 12 habits, and because of everything that happened, I just did not use them, and it was a very big waste for me. So this time I'm kind of easing myself back into my daily routines, and I'm just gonna have 4 habits for this month. If you want, you can always go back and download one of my previous month's habit trackers if you want more, but this is just for me to slowly get back to some normalcy. I want to take a moment and say thank you to the viewer that had suggested me using Google Voice to try to fix the issue with my Google AdSense and YouTube monetization. Unfortunately, it didn't work because it says that it's not available in my country. And I tried 3 other apps and they all said they're not available in Italy. So it looks like I'm just kind of stuck until I get back to the States. I should have fixed it while I was in the States for the funeral, but let's just say I had other things on my mind. It was the last thing that I thought about, but now that I'm back here in Italy, I'm kind of kicking myself for not doing it. But maybe if I get to go back to the States and have some more time and it's not an emergency situation, I'll be able to do it then. While I'm on the subject of traveling, I want to take a moment and kind of caution English speakers about how they travel. And I am not a professional by any sense of the word, but I do have a working knowledge of 3 different languages. I also know some Korean, Spanish, and now Italian. And I am not proficient at any of them by any stretch of the words, but I do know enough to kind of give you some words of caution. On my trip to the States, on 2 different times, I noticed English speakers, whenever they're not understood, instead of trying to figure out a different word, they just became louder. And let me tell you, when someone doesn't understand the word you're saying, Simply yelling it at them is not going to make it any better. Instead, I would suggest to start looking for similar words. If you want to know if something is toasted, ask, is it hot? Is it melted? Is it, just start saying different words. And a lot of times they'll know one of the words. They just may not know the exact one that you want. For example, when I was in Alabama and I was at the rental car station, the rental car person asked an Asian man who was in front of me. I'm not sure if he was Chinese or Japanese. I could only see the back of his head, but he was trying to use the translator to figure out what she was asking, because she kept asking, are you gonna fill her up or are you gonna prepay? As a Southerner, I know she was asking, is he going to fill the gas tank up or does he want to prepay with gas? But she didn't explain that. She just kept getting louder. Are you gonna fill her up or prepay? And that was very frustrating for me, because obviously the gentleman knew enough English. He was responding to her in English, but he just didn't know that exact Southern phrase. And that happens a lot. When we were in a layover in Rome, there was an English-speaking woman, I believe she was Canadian, and she kept yelling, is it melted? Is it melted? They didn't know the word, and instead of asking, is it hot? Is it toasted? She just kept yelling at the people, is it melted? So I had to jump in and translate for her. If you're in a situation like that, please don't yell at these people. It's very rare for someone to speak English in another country. A lot of the younger generations do, but it's not a given, and I don't take that for granted. I know how difficult it is to speak another language. So when you're out, please be gracious. If they're having a hard time, figuring out what you're saying, use Google Translate or use different words until something clicks. But please don't raise your voice at someone who's trying their hardest to help you. I guess really that could apply to anyone working in hospitality, regardless of the language. Please be kind to each other. Now, I don't accept injustices or any kind of rudeness or cruelty, but until someone gives me a reason, then I'm going to be kind and give everyone a chance. Ooh, I did not mean to jump on that soapbox. I'm sorry. The section I'm working on right now for me is going to be my content layout, and I normally Photoshop the word content out, but I just left it blank this time, so you can use it as a notes section or a brain dump or whatever you find that you need. And I just think it's a really pretty page. I just finished yesterday watching a trigger page, or like a memory jogger page from Jashi Koren that I really, really liked. So I might add that to this page next month. We'll see. I think this shot really gives you a good idea of just how much shading can make a difference between the side on the left and the side on the right that I'm now working. It just makes the biggest difference. In my last YouTube video, I went through my entire witchcraft library and went over every single one of my books. That's over 85 books I think I went through. And I had a viewer ask for my top 10 books. And so that's going to be my next video. If you want to stick around and subscribe to my channel for that, I'm going to be going over my top 10 books that I would suggest to any witch, regardless of whether they're a beginner or not. Okay, and now on to my astrology page. For this month's moon, the full moon is going to be in Scorpio, and Scorpio is a very determined, passionate, and resourceful sign. So maybe for determination, you're going to work on the projects that you've been putting off. Or for passionate, maybe you are going to work on being closer to your spouse and incorporating more date nights. So think about things that you would like to increase in your life during that stage. and the new moon is in Gemini this month. They can be inconsistent, indecisive, or irritable. So maybe those are some triggers that you need to work on. Maybe do some shadow work, find out why you get so irritable on certain things. Or maybe focus on letting go of your perfectionism and being okay with a little bit of inconsistency here or there. I swear I am horrible at drawing faces, and I think I'm somehow even worse at drawing clip art faces. So just don't look too close to them this month. From the faraway view is very nice. And on the images at the bottom, I know that it's a lotus and not an iris, but at this point I was so tired that it was just pretty, so I went with it. Now, if you had followed me for a little while, then you know that last year I did not do a May bullet journal layout. And to be quite honest, that was because I kind of wanted to avoid talking about the next subject, and that is May Day, Beltane, and Bealtaine. And you'll notice that I said that word in two different pronunciations, and I have used two different spellings. And that is because Beltane and Bealtaine are technically two different holidays. And I'm going to touch on the subject. However, there are many other authors, YouTubers, and people who go more in depth into the appropriation of Beltane. As a matter of fact, I will leave a direct link below to the video posted by Diary of a Ditch Witch, where she explains a lot of the appropriation and how to properly pronounce Beltane. In the West, we're coming to terms with just how bad the New Age movement was in terms of cultural appropriation, and Gerald Gardner was the big honcho for a lot of that. He took a lot of holidays from their respective cultures, kind of merged them together without any respect for the original holiday, and Bealtaine was no different. He merged Beltane and May Day together and created his Beltane. So when you hear a Wiccan talk about the holiday, they will call it Beltane, but the people in Gaelic and Celtic countries still call it Bealtaine. And here's where I had to transfer over to number 61 because my marker was giving out. For a little historical background, Beltane was a fire festival, and this was a time when farmers would be moving their cattle from their homestead up to the highlands, and that way that they could farm vegetables at their homestead, and their cows and such would have access to the fresh green grass in the highlands. Because of this change and this movement, this was also a time that they thought that the Fae folk would be trying to prank them or cast bad magics on them. So they would also be looking at counter curses, and they would run their cattle through over fires to purify them. They would do the same thing for butter, and that was all there was to that festival. And you'll notice that Beltane is very different from Beltane because in the Wicca lore, Beltane has much to do with the Lord and Lady, which does not exist in Celtic folklore. Another major difference between the two holidays is Beltane has a lot of associations with it. You'll see a lot of charts that have food and candles and crystals associated with the holidays. These are not associated with the Gaelic festival of Beltane. And as a matter of fact, the sharing of food would have been a big no-no because from sunup to sundown on May 1st on Beltane, you would not share anything with your neighbors, and that included your time because it was thought that whatever you shared would be taken away from you, like a lack of abundance, and could also be used against you in negative purposes. Now, I have absolutely nothing against anyone who celebrates Beltane. As I said, I just view Beltane and Beltane as two separate holidays. Beltane is Wicca and is a new holiday, and just be aware that it is not Celtic or Gaelic, or even really based on that holiday. It is something completely new. It just so happens to use the westernized version of the same name. Now, one of the traditions that I've heard of, even from my own grandmother, was On the 1st of May, if you go outside and you get some dew from the leaves and wash your face, you'll be youthful and beautiful for the rest of your life. I have since heard another theory that it would help protect you from sunburn during that year, and I kind of put more stock into that one. Mostly because my family's Irish from Londonderry, Ireland, and we could use all the sun protection help we can get. Another image that you'll often see associated with Beltane or Bealtaine is the maypole. This was originally a Germanic pagan tradition thought to be from the Iron Age, and while the tradition continued after Christianization, it lost all of its meaning, so nobody actually knows what it was really intended to be for. But there are many different versions of the maypole depending on where you come from, and even Italy, after Napoleon's invasion, started doing a maypole tradition of their own. For my Sabbath page, I am just going to go with the spelling for Beltane since that is the Western spelling for it. And I want this to be kind of simple that you could use for either the Bealtaine or Bealtaine should you wish. And I'm only going to be putting on it the maypole. And that's because while both Beltane and Bealtaine do use the maypole, I have a very fond memory. Gosh, I had to have been 4 years old because back when I was a child, my mom used the public library as a sort of babysitter for me, for lack of a better word. I remember being dropped off there many times while she went about her day, and she would come and get me, page me at the front counter when it was time for us to go home. And I remember going one time and they had this huge maypole set up, and I had no clue what it was, but they handed me a ribbon and they told me outside. And they would go to the next person and give them a ribbon and say inside. And we went about with the dance and we made this beautiful weaving. I have no clue how those wonderful librarians managed to make it look so beautiful. That had to have been like herding a whole bunch of cats. But it is one of my most fond memories. So if there's any librarians out there, just know you do matter and you are making a difference in some child's life, whether you know it or not. For the ribbons, I'm going to be using the colors 08, 65, 84, and 97. And now with the Sabbath page finished, that is the last spread. And now time for us to do the walkthrough. I really like the color scheme for this month. I think while it is simplistic, it is very eye-catching. I thought I was making a simplistic layout this time, but I think I went a little bit extra on the borders, but I'm really happy with the way they turned out, even if they did take longer than I would have liked. I hope you've enjoyed following along with me, and I hope that you've gained some inspiration. I will make sure to leave a link below to my blog if you would like to download this or other of my layouts. If you enjoyed this video, if you wouldn't mind, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, be sure to hit the subscribe button. And if you want to leave a comment letting me know what your favorite page was, or if you're going to be celebrating Beltane or Bealtaine, all the comments help YouTube get this video to more people, and I would greatly appreciate it. Love you. Bye.